building a lot of wall.
Okay, 2 points here. First, let's fact check this. It's not true. None of what the president said is true. No new sections of the border wall have been built or are being built. We stretched our graphics staff tonight to show you this. That's the number of miles of wall that have been built. Second, if the wall was being built as the president claims, why did he shut the government down for 35 days? What was the point of the shutdown if the border wall was already under construction? Okay, back to the other universe that the president is living in. He also falsely claimed today that he has the money to build his wall.
Have you found the money to build the wall if you do have to?
Well, we have a lot of money, and that's why we're building it. We're already appropriated. We have a lot of appropriation. It's already been done.
Okay, let's fact check that point, too. It's also not true. Congress has not authorized any new funds for the border wall. That was the reason for the government shutdown. In fact, congressional negotiators are working right now to figure out how to avoid a second shutdown. The president is claiming he has money for a wall that he doesn't have and claiming that that same wall is being built when it's not. Of course, some of this is thanks to Nancy Pelosi, who refuses to cave to Trump's funding demands for the wall.
Are you no longer ruling out any money for the wall? Are you now open for money for the wall?
Have I not been clear on a wall?
You have not been clear.
Okay. No, I have been very clear on the wall.
Are you committed to bringing that to the floor program?
Well, if they come out with a bipartisan consensus, of course.
Even if it includes border wall money, though?
We're not having a negotiation over this right now. They're having a negotiation over it in there. There's not going to be any wall money in the legislation.
Okay, it should come as little surprise that the president continued his attack today on the House Speaker.
You had quite the showdown with Speaker Pelosi. What did you learn about negotiating with her?
Well, I think that she was very rigid, which I would expect, but I think she is very bad for our country. She knows that you need a barrier. She knows that we need border security. She wanted to win a political point.
She offered you over $1 billion for border security.
Excuse me?
She offered over $1 billion for border security. She doesn't want the wall.
She's costing the country hundreds of billions of dollars because what's happening is when you have a porous border and when you have drugs pouring in and when you have people dying all over the country because of people like Nancy Pelosi who don't want to give proper border security for political reasons, she's doing a terrible disservice to our country.
You're still going to have to deal with her, though.
No, she can keep playing her games, but we will win because we have a much better issue.
All right, the alternate universe continues. Here's the problem with the president's thesis. It's just not right. Polling this week from Quinnipiac University shows that voters trust Democrats in Congress on border security more than they trust the president. And they trust Nancy Pelosi more on the important issues than they trust the president. You may be asking, what's a president to do when support isn't on his side? Well, just make it up. Trump actually tried saying today, and I hope you're sitting down for this, that a secret movement of Democrats want him to build the wall.
In all fairness to the Democrats, many of them want the wall, and I see it. They're just dying to say what they want to say, but they can't say it as well as they would be able to if they were allowed to do it.
To be clear, no Democrats have come out in support of funding the president's border wall as he's demanded it. While Nancy Pelosi isn't a member of the negotiating committee that's working to fund the government, you can bet that any final deal is going to have her seal of approval, and that approval certainly won't include money for a border wall. That's just the reality of the situation. Joining us now, Neera Tanden, president of the Center for American Progress, and Maya Wiley, former civil prosecutor for the Southern District of New York and former counsel to the mayor of New York City. She's an MSNBC legal analyst. Thank you to both of you. Welcome. Neera, let's start with you. Donald Trump seems to have focused his attention or refocused his attention now on Nancy Pelosi. That hasn't worked for him since this new Congress has come into force. Nancy Pelosi it seems to have outmaneuvered Donald Trump once, and he keeps going at it for some reason.
In fact, Donald Trump's attacks on Nancy Pelosi have done nothing except shore up and strengthen Nancy Pelosi. If you had asked Republicans a year ago whether she would be, almost 10 points more popular than Donald Trump, they would have said that's not possible. But then now we have Donald Trump, and he has done this incredible thing, which is to make Nancy Pelosi far more popular than him. And I think really her strength comes from the fact that he is a bully who has bullied Republicans into subservience, and people want to check on that. And she stands up to him. She's able to deliver results. She's negotiated the best hand, and he's had to cave to her and hasn't had to cave to too many people. So I think he should keep attacking her. She'll get to 55, 60, 65% if he keeps going.
Maya, it's kind of interesting that the president raised, by the way, after everything else he had said, that there's these Democrats who want to say what they want to say. There is a new freshman group of Democrats. There are some progressives who have been elected who do not appear to be shy of saying whatever they want to say.
Even when other Democrats don't like
that is correct. In fact, I would say that they're there in stronger force than we've seen for a while. So if there are some secret Democrats who want to fund this wall, it doesn't seem likely. Nancy Pelosi seems to have her caucus in line on this.
Absolutely. And I think all of this, when we go back to the facts, that we have 700 miles of wall already, that we have the Rio Grande River, and we have deserts that also form natural barriers, and that 2/3 of people who come into the country who are here now without proper documentation came in on airplanes or
with visas that they overstayed.
With visas that they overstayed. This is why Democrats are saying, although we agree, well, first of all, some Democrats actually may not agree on increasing funding for border security. That may be a point of contention between some of the new Democrats versus some of the Democrats.
But none of them are over.
But that's on the other
side,
right? That's pulling in the other direction, because the primary policy point that Democrats have been asserting is we're pro-border security. You want to raise, as Kellyanne Conway did today, issues of getting fentanyl when it's coming into being smuggled in the country. That came through an official border crossing, and folks making the point that a wall would not have prevented that. So the question becomes, what is border security? What do we mean by border security? How do we even understand what borders are? And who do we need to be able to access the country, as we've talked about asylum seekers, and how are we making sure there's a rational process for immigration that makes it a real pathway to citizenship for a lot of people? That's the debate that so many Democrats really want to have. And unfortunately, in this context, that's the discussion they haven't been able to have.
Near us, February 15th is when the government could shut down again if there isn't a deal. The president continues to raise the specter of declaring a national emergency, which a lot of legal experts say he can do because it's very loosely defined as to what a national emergency is. However, apparently, according to the Washington Post, Mitch McConnell, who's strangely silent these days, has urged the president privately not to do that. Let me just read you from the article. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell cautioned President Trump privately this week about the consequences of declaring a national emergency to build his border wall, telling him the move could trigger political blowback and divide the GOP, according to two Republicans with knowledge of the exchange. McConnell told Trump that Congress might end up passing a resolution disapproving the emergency declaration, the people said, which would force the president to contemplate issuing his first veto ever in the face of opposition from his own party. To your earlier point, Neera, the president claimed that he would own the shutdown if it happened. Seems the American people are quite willing to let him do that. He was outmaneuvered the first time by Nancy Pelosi. He's now a week out from possibly being outmaneuvered again. He's got Mitch McConnell telling him don't declare a national emergency, and he may not have the deal that he wants to fund his wall.
See, I think this is exactly why he said what he said today, because I literally believe that he is telling his supporters that he's already built the wall and is already building the wall because he thinks he can convince them that it's true. And despite the fact that we had a government shutdown, I mean, it seems laughable, but I think that's how insane this world has become, because obviously he knows Republicans just were about to bolt last week. So he was forced to reopen the government. There is no appetite by Senate Republicans to shut down the government again. Zero. Zilch. He can do a national emergency, but it's incredibly unpopular. And So I think he literally is going to now just say to people, we're building the wall. And if he repeats it enough, maybe 30 or 35%.
30
Fox
plus
News
percent.
they'll agree with him. We'll just magically think that the wall is being built. And frankly, from my perspective, this might be the easiest solution because no wall will ever be built.
Just pretend the wall is there.
We're just all going to be in a magical world where there's a wall.
It is an alternate universe. 20-some odd percentage of Americans still apparently believe Barack Obama is a Kenyan-born Muslim, so it's not that much of a stretch to get a third of Americans to believe the wall's being built. However, is there something to the president repeating things like this? More importantly, the allegation that Nancy Pelosi is letting drugs into the country. Democrats don't want border security. There is a lot of money on the table for border security.
There's a lot of money.
In fact, there's more money on the table for border security than there is for President Trump's wall.
It also ignores that we've had, I think it's roughly a decade of an increase in spending on border security at a fairly rapid pace. So
a decrease in the number of people coming across the border.
That's absolutely right, and a decrease. And so the real problem here, like so many issues that we're facing right now as a country, is how do we understand what the facts are and then have an actual debate about what the best resolutions are of the problems that we agree have to be resolved. Because as many people have said, what are we doing about comprehensive immigration reform? I mean, the reality is, if you are a parent who is a now naturalized citizen, and you're trying to bring your child lawfully into the country, you are going to wait an average of 6 years as a citizen to try to get your child into the country lawfully. That's a broken system. And that is one of the questions that we have to answer is, how do we create something that actually makes sense? Not whether or not we should have a system of immigration, but how do we make it work? So, but you can't have that conversation rationally as a country unless you're willing to agree to what some core facts are, which are established. And that's our problem.
Ellie, can I just add one quick thing, which I think one important point here is that we may end up in a world where Democrats have offered smart, not stupid, smart border security that actually redresses asylum claims, that actually has smart technology on the border. And then really, all of these efforts by Trump to attack Democrats as weak on border security will actually backfire because it will have actually provided more resources to legitimate border security. And I think the fact that you may end up in a world where Democrats' numbers on border security, which are already better than President Trump's, increase even more.
Neera Tanden, thank you for joining me. Maya Wiley, stick around because we're going to talk a little more about what's going on in Virginia. Coming up, Donald Trump reportedly has a question about voters and his wall. And Michael Moore has an answer. Michael Moore is going to be joining us in studio a little later. I'm going to ask him about Donald Trump versus Chuck and Nancy and about the ever-expanding field of Democratic presidential candidates and maybe a potential billionaire independent candidate. But first, more Democrats are calling on Virginia Governor Ralph Northam to resign after today's revelation of his clearly racist and offensive photograph in his medical school yearbook. Breaking news tonight out of Virginia. Governor Ralph Northam is now responding to the discovery of what can only be described as a racist photo in his medical school yearbook. Let's show it to you. The photo, as you see here on your screen in full context, appears on Northam's page in the 1984 yearbook for Eastern Virginia Medical School. It shows two men. The picture on the right shows two men, one dressed as a member of the Ku Klux Klan, the other in blackface. Northam released a written statement apologizing, followed by this video statement shortly thereafter.
My fellow Virginians, earlier today I released a statement apologizing for behavior in my past that falls far short of the standard you set for me when you elected me to be your governor. I believe you deserve to hear directly from me. That photo and the racist and offensive attitudes it represents does not reflect that person I am today or the way that I have conducted myself as a soldier, a doctor, and a public servant. I am deeply sorry. I cannot change the decisions I made, nor can I undo the harm my behavior caused then and today. But I accept responsibility for my past actions, and I am ready to do the hard work of regaining your trust. I have spent the past year as your governor fighting for a Virginia that works better for all people. I am committed to continuing that fight through the remainder of my term and living up to the expectations you set for me when you elected me to serve. Thank you.
All right, that was Ralph Northam. Joining me now, Derek Johnson, President and CEO of the NAACP. Derek, thank you for joining us. I want to just show our viewers what you tweeted tonight. You said blackface in any manner is always racist and never okay, no matter the party affiliation. We cannot stand for such behavior, which is why the NAACP is calling for the resignation of Virginia Governor Ralph Northam. Does his apology, the video apology, which was more comprehensive, in which he does not make any excuses and he acknowledges the harm that he did, does that have any impact on your thinking about this?
Well, I think it's important that he actually made the statement. However, our position remains the same. 1984, although it feels like it was a long time ago, was well established that African Americans have been treated wrongly by this nation, by individuals, and to have blackface or a Klan uniform when you're in medical school, that's problematic, and we should not allow that to take place in this society, considering the current sense of intolerance that's germinating from the White House.
Have you had an opportunity to express your views other than in the tweet? Has the NAACP reached out to the governor, or have you received any response from him?
Well, he's spoken with our state president of Virginia, but our position is clear. We are a nonpartisan organization that fight against racism and discrimination. And because we would do this, if it was a Republican governor, if it was Donald Trump in the White House, we do it across the board. It is important for the NAACP to set the tone of higher morality, because we must have a standard where all individuals are treated equally, fairly, and with equal protection under the law, and have caricatures of blackface and in Klan uniforms is not something that should be tolerated.
And when you talk about having a sort of a standard across the board, many instances in which people in the last election cycle, for instance, were accused of doing things that were racist, there were excuses given, there were denials about whether or not they believed it was the case. The difference in this particular case, and I'll just read this again from the video statement that the governor issued. He said, "I cannot change the decisions I made, nor can I undo the harm my behavior caused then and today, but I accept my responsibility for my past actions." And this is the part that I want to ask you about. "And I am ready to do the hard work of regaining your trust." What does that look like to you? What can that be? If he doesn't resign, does that have meaning to you?
It has very little meaning. You know, if there was some real honesty in embracing the problem, it would have been addressed on the front end and not uncovered by a third party. It's interesting when individuals get caught, they're remorseful, they want to change, they want to fix things, they want to change the way things happen, and in many cases, they want to rewrite history. Unfortunately, you can't take this away, and there was no disclosure on the front end, therefore, our position remains the same.
So that's interesting to me. What does that look like? Disclosure on the front end, because I guess that's relevant to a lot of people running for office today. They go through their past and they say, you know, in Ralph Northam's case, I'm a doctor, I was a soldier, I've served my state, but there's going to be this problem because there was this picture in my yearbook, and maybe I hung around with people. We don't know which one he is in the picture, whether he hung around with people who had Klan outfits or hung around with people who were in blackface. How would that look for somebody who's running for office today? Should they sort of disclose that and then say, I know this is going to be a problem, but I'm not the man that I was in 1984?
Absolutely. We've seen politicians up front talk about prior drug use, prior other issues. You know, I think the African-American community and the American people in general will be forgiving if people come forward and say, you know, I am flawed, and because of my past, I am working towards correcting that, and say it up front. Don't allow it to be a got you moment, because it's the got you moments which then people say, you know, are you really serious, or did you just get caught? And I think in this scenario, he just got caught.
Derek, always good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Derek Johnson is the president and CEO of the NAACP. We will have more on this story coming up with Mark Thompson. Maya Wiley's joining me again. And stay with us, because Michael Moore is coming up to answer a pressing question that Donald Trump has been anxiously asking his own staff. It's got to do with his reelection.
We had a tremendous this tragedy in Charlottesville 2 months ago, and it's unfortunate. Our president didn't stand up and call these white supremacists out for who they are. Ed Gillespie has had over 70 days to stand up and denounce our president for not standing up and calling these supremacists out for who they were. To tell these supremacists that we don't condone hatred and bigotry in Virginia, and to go back where you came from and don't ever come back to Virginia.
That was then candidate Ralph Northam in 2017 talking about the white supremacist rally in Charlottesville. Joining me now to talk more about this, Mark Thompson, host of Make It Plain on Sirius XM Radio. Maya Wiley is back with us. Thank you very much for joining us. Maya, what's your take? I've got in front of me papers and statements from politicians and tweets calling for Ralph Northam's resignation. What's your thought?
So their behavior was inexcusable. It was flat out racist. It was explicitly racist, not what we would call subconsciously biased, where you aren't even aware that what you're doing might be really offensive and racist. There is no question that it was awful. What's complicated to me in this one is, and Governor Northam has not done it yet, and I think Derek Johnson, who's also a close personal friend, made a very important point when he said, if you are reformed, if you are redeemed, if you have learned, where and how can we look and find the examples of that? And you didn't come forward in the beginning and say, I did this bad thing and I recognize it was bad and here's how I've worked through it. He didn't, in his statement that he made today, which was saying this is not defensible and I take full responsibility, but we didn't hear what has he learned about race since he did that in 1984. Where was he in 1984 that led him to do such a heinous thing as that we've seen in those images? And what has changed? His record, his policy record is significantly different and better than, say, a Senator Hyde Smith, who, as we've talked about in the past, I think what she has done is worse in the sense that it was current and that she is unrepentant about it and that it follows along her policy agenda. In other words, she will make decisions that will impact people's lives directly. That's not to let Governor Northam off the hook. That's to say, we do want a country that recognizes that people can learn and move past their racism because we know that they can. But he has to demonstrate it, and he hasn't yet.
We have the mayor of Richmond, Mayor LeVar Stoney, has said Governor Northam has a long and distinguished history of service to our Commonwealth and our nation, but he should do the honorable thing and step down. We have tweets from Kamala Harris, Kirsten Gillibrand, Elizabeth Warren, Julian Castro, all asking for his resignation. But there are some people who aren't. There are some Virginia politicians who are not. Mark, what's your take?
He should resign. He must. Otherwise, it gives Donald Trump something to talk about at the State of the Union next week, and Donald Trump can continue to be hypocritical because, ironically, it was Charlottesville that helped elect Ralph Northam, that extreme racist behavior that Donald Trump defended. Donald Trump should resign from that. For that. There may be Democrats who say, well, that's a double standard. If Donald Trump can get away with it, if Steve King can get away with it, why can't Ralph Northam? Well, you have to take the moral high ground. And Ralph Northam and the Democratic Party can take the moral high ground by him resigning. True contrition for blackface. It also goes to competency. Let me just say this quickly. He knew this was in his yearbook. Why would you put yourself up for office without dealing with that directly on the front end? That goes to competence. And I'd love to know other people involved in helping him convince him or convince themselves that this would never be found. He was vulnerable. You talking about compromise. His enemies in Virginia, let's be honest, the people who found this weren't virtuous. They are fighting against him because he was in a progressive way. He's been progressive since he's been governor. He was fighting to defend the reproductive rights for women. Right. So they said, okay, so we got you. We got you. We'll show you as a racist. So he lost. You lose the battle, but you win the war. He has to resign. And true contrition for blackface is not delaying a second longer in showing good faith in your black lieutenant governor, Justin Fairfax. If we're on a team, I'm on a basketball court and I'm coaching a game, I've got a competent sub on the bench. When my player gets hurt, I go to a sub. Justin is that sub. He's competent. Ralph Northam won with 53.9% of the vote. Justin won with about 52.8%. That's a very almost equal competent sub.
Yeah.
Put him in, and then Justin, as a black governor, will honestly be probably the first Virginia governor to succeed himself.
So I want to press this issue a little bit, Maya, because in the things that we've covered in the last several months, including with DeSantis in Florida, you and I talked about this,
Right.
and we talked about Mississippi. Those were delayed reactions. Those were weird apologies. Those were if I offended anybody. Again, to me, there's some value. It's not determinate, but there's some value. And he says, in what he said, I cannot change the decisions I made. He's admitted what he's done. And he said, I cannot, nor can I undo the harm my behavior caused then and today, which I think is interesting because he's acknowledging harm. In those other cases that we both talked about, that nobody acknowledged harm, everybody said, you misunderstood me, I didn't mean that. And then he said, I am ready to do the hard work of regaining your trust. Mark thinks the hard work of regaining your trust starts with resignation. What else can it be? If it's not resignation, if he doesn't resign, how does he do the hard work of regaining trust?
So, Mark acknowledged this as well, he already has a policy platform that's very clearly about racial justice in the sense that he is about, dealing with driver's license that are being suspended, where essentially poverty prevents people from driving and having a livelihood, and that disproportionately impacts people of color. He wants to reform sentencing laws. He recognizes that voter ID laws have really been a way of disenfranchising voters of color, in particular black voters. So he's got that record. What he doesn't have, and this is what I was talking about earlier, he did a half step in this, in exactly what you're saying, Allie. He said the right things about taking responsibility and recognizing his harm. What else? What has he learned? What is he doing differently? How can he convince
evolution?
us? Mm-hmm.
Thank you both for your analysis. I appreciate it. Maya Wiley and Mark Thompson. Michael Moore is here in studio. He'll be my next guest. Donald Trump is refusing to budge over his border wall with 2 weeks to go until the government shuts down again. The president told the New York Times that the bipartisan spending talks to find a deal on border security are a, quote, waste of time. And today he reiterated that he is not ruling out taking action on his own by declaring a national emergency to get his wall funding. But Trump's message is not resonating with voters. Polling shows Americans do not want another shutdown, nor do they want Trump taking disaster relief money if he doesn't get money for his wall. And 54% of Americans say they will blame Trump and congressional Republicans if the government shuts down again. Today, Axios reports that over the past week, President Trump has asked friends and advisors how they think the shutdown has affected him politically and what he should be doing to recover his standing in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Trump has also been polling these advisors on who they think will be the most formidable challenger to him in 2020. And that seems like a question Michael Moore might have an answer to. So I'm going to ask him right after this.
We will be looking at a national emergency because I don't think anything's going to happen. We're getting nowhere with the Democrats. We're not going to get anywhere with them. It's going to be a part of their campaign, but I don't think it's good politically. And I think Nancy Pelosi should be ashamed of herself because she's hurting a lot of people.
Donald Trump might be publicly blaming Nancy Pelosi for how the shutdown played out, but as Axios reports, privately, Trump is worried that the shutdown has hurt him in states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And somebody who knows those parts of the country very well is Michael Moore. He's an Academy Award-winning documentary filmmaker. His latest film, Fahrenheit 11/9, is now streaming on Amazon Prime. It's available on DVD, Blu-ray, and iTunes. Michael, good to see you. I definitely
always got to get the plug in there, don't you?
Got to get the plug in there.
We just can't just get right to saving the country.
No, we got to get the plug in because pretty soon, if I do that for you, you're going to say something nice about Canada and single-payer health care pretty soon. But before we get to any of that stuff, I just want to ask you about the Ralph Northam situation. As you can see here, I've got tweets and statements from people about Ralph Northam should resign. Ralph Northam should resign. Mark Warner of Virginia and Tim Kaine have both not explicitly called for his resignation. They've said he has to listen to the people of Virginia and make a decision about what he has to do. But newspapers are calling for his resignation. What should Ralph Northam do?
Well, let's start with the broader picture. What should the Democrats do? Mm-hmm. The Democrats have been, in part, responsible for not doing the things that need to be done to lift African Americans off the lowest rung of the economic ladder. And that has to change. Democrats have got to quit just mouthing this, I support African Americans, and then not really doing anything about it. And, we had Democrats in charge for 8 years. And during that time, Flint, Michigan, the water gets poisoned. The Republican governor is responsible for this, and yet nothing happens. And it's an African American city. It's majority African American. That's the broad picture. The little thing that we've got to deal with right now is, are you telling me that during the commercial break, Ralph Northam did not resign?
He did not apparently.
He has not resigned.
Yeah.
He must be watching the cable news right now. Ralph, please. All right. You have to resign by the time the show's over. You know it. I know it. Everybody watching knows it. You need to, in fact, call in right now into the show if you could. The switchboard here at NBC, 212-664-4444. Ralph, call us right now. Allie and I will take the call. Will you take the call?
We will definitely take the call.
Can he resign live on the air?
I'm surprised you knew the phone number. I didn't even know the phone number.
All of America knows the phone number to the three major networks.
So if Ralph Northam calls in, we'll definitely take the call. Do you give some credence to the apology that he recorded in which he acknowledges the harm that he did? He didn't do what others have done who have been accused of these things. He said, I did it. He said, I've harmed people and I can't change that. And now I want to rebuild trust. I mean, look.
Rebuild trust by resigning. That's 212-664-4444. Allie and I can take your call live right now on the air. No, he has to go.
All right.
What he did, what he said, yes, but that doesn't matter. Our side doesn't tolerate this for 1 second. When was this announced? How many hours ago? I can't believe he's still the governor of Virginia. This
very interesting.
Needs to end by the end of the last word.
Let's talk about the shutdown or the emergency declaration. The president today went out of his way to explain that a wall is being built. It's under construction now. He's lying. There are 0 miles of wall under construction, but this does seem to be a tactic he's using now. Let's just say it's being built, and maybe his base will support him, and the Ann Coulters of the world will say it's okay. This isn't going to work. He's not going to get his money for his wall. He's being warned, apparently, by Mitch McConnell not to declare a national emergency because that's going to run into problems, even with Republicans.
Okay, so let's look at the positive of this. All right. Yes, Donald Trump lies 30 to 40 times a day, but he did give us a sliver of truth today, and that's when he did say, "I have other measures," and that he is putting it out there that he's going to declare this national emergency. I would take him at his word, because every now and then he actually blurts out what he's planning to do. For us to spend the next 2 weeks not thinking anything's going to happen, I mean, we really need to be prepared as citizens of this country for whatever he does with his national emergency, whether it's written on John Bolton's legal pad or not. Let's start a war. Let's send troops to Colombia.
That was kind of incredible.
Well, it was incredible that it shows what they're thinking in basic wag the dog fashion here. They know that by starting a war, or having a crisis, some emergency, is a way to get people's minds off the real issue, that he is a colluder and that there is going to be an impeachment of him. He doesn't want anybody talking about that, so we spend all our time talking about the shutdown or this or that. But he already knows the shutdown isn't going to work again. He's got to do what got him elected. Just take it by the collar and go for it. And that's what he's going to do. And why are we sitting around waiting for that to happen? We should be making our plans right now as to how we're going to resist and stop his fake national emergency.
He's been asking people about the trouble he's having in the Midwest. A Detroit News WDIV poll asked Michigan voters who they blame for the shutdown. 45% said Donald Trump, 26% said Democrats, 22% said both. But the bottom line...
Actually, in Michigan, 1% actually blamed me. But
all right, fair enough.
I know those people don't believe them.
What do you... Donald Trump is having problems across the Midwest. He knows that. He's now, apparently, according to some reporting, asking advisors how he recovers his standing in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan.
Again, it shows when he does click. That's the right question he should be asking himself, because that's how he won the White House. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. And they all tossed out the Republican in the governor chair, and they put a Democrat in November. That he can see the writing on the wall, that he's losing these key states that are now going back to turning blue. And so he knows that he should be thinking about Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. But how is he going to, in the town where I live, up in northern Michigan, it's a Coast Guard town. It's where one of the big Coast Guard stations are for the Great Lakes. And there were so many people affected by this in ways I think that people were surprised when you and others would show it on the news here, going to food pantries and not being able to pay the bills and getting eviction notices and things like that. Who would have thought that why would anybody serving this country ever have to worry?
A government employee has to do that they had to call into these shows and tell us about how they were going to miss their mortgage payments,
yes.
how they couldn't get food, how they, it's unbelievable. I had somebody telling me, a TSA worker saying, I can't go to work because I can't afford the gas because the gas station doesn't give you a loan. They don't give you gas on credit.
No, it was very powerful. The things that you and Stephanie did during that shutdown, it was, you couldn't, you'd tear up watching.
I did every day.
MSNBC. Yes, yeah. It was. We
weren't watching people after a natural disaster. We weren't watching people after a tsunami had hit their homes. These are regular people who are either going to work or not working, but for no cause, we're not getting paid.
Harm being inflicted upon them by essentially our representative in the White House.
Yeah.
It's so many shameful moments in these 2 years.
When we come back, we're going to talk about the question that Donald Trump is asking himself, the concern he has about who can beat him in 2020. Michael Moore is with me. We'll be right back with more of The Last Word. All right, Michael Moore is back with us. We got to talk about 2020. Michael, there are a lot of people running for president on the Democratic side, a lot of people who are asking themselves the question about whether they can do a better job than Donald Trump, and most of them are coming up with an answer that says, yes, that group of 8 is going to become much bigger probably over the course of the next couple of months.
Yeah.
Are they asking themselves the right question?
Well, no, because can I do better than Donald Trump? Camera 2? I'd vote for him. Seriously. Anyone in this room, anybody out there, anybody watching right now, obviously could probably do a better job than Donald Trump. No, the question they need to be asking is, who's going to crush Donald Trump? Who can win? Really win. Not just win the popular vote, win Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Who could crush Trump? Who is that person? Ask yourself that right now. If you're at home, ask yourselves right now, who's that person that right now, tonight, could crush Donald Trump?
Do you think that's more important than taking positions on things? We knew that health care was one of the biggest issues to most American voters in the last election, certainly to Democratic voters. Yeah. And everybody's taking out a position on health care, and many of them are coming out on the side of single-payer health care. You think the who can crush Donald Trump will be the most important question above?
I think it already is. I think they asked that question in an Iowa poll of Democrats last week, and that was the number one thing people came back with. Yes, of course, health care, tax the rich, raise the minimum wage, end mass incarceration, all these things that are essentially being pushed by the new progressive Democrats in the House. That's what I wish. It's too bad that you have to be 35 to be president. That we put that in the Constitution, the Founding Fathers, because people died at 38 or 40 back then. We need to lower that. If that was lowered to 30.
All right. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is that where you're going with this?
Could be running. She just has to be 30 by the time January of 2021.
So look, everybody can out progressive each other on their platforms. You're saying that she's got fire in the belly to get
She is the
going?
leader. She is the leader. Everybody knows it. Everybody feels it. She's the leader of this mass movement that is not, I'm not talking about a movement in terms of an organization. I'm talking about a Fox News poll this week where it said 70% of the American public agree with her on having the top marginal rate for the rich, their taxes, 70% rate on the rich. And that's a Fox News poll saying that. Over 2/3 of the country.
Now, there are a lot of Americans who think that's crazy, but they also don't remember that we had marginal tax rates above 90%.
Yes,
at a time when the economy was actually doing.
I grew up in that time, and that's when all the libraries.
I'm not advocating for it. I'm just saying
the libraries were open. There weren't potholes. Schools were great.
Yeah. Fox likes talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah.
I think they talk about her more than anybody else does. The right is enjoying having her as the image of what Democrats are. Is there a danger if someone that progressive runs that it it does turn off moderates, or do you think that's not a danger worth worrying about?
I'm not. No. First of all, if you're moderate, stop being moderate. Take a position. All right. There's no middle ground anymore. There's no halfway point to should somebody be paid a living wage. Well, I'm a moderate, so I think they could be paid half of a living wage. You know, on the issue of choice, there's no halfway there. You're either for it or you're against it. You know, do you believe in equal rights for women? Do you believe that we should have an equal rights amendment? Yes or no? There's no middle ground. This is no time
So
for moderation.
where there is middle ground possibly is healthcare and taxes. Right?
Why,
how
where?
much you tax the rich.
Oh, how much? 70% of the people said tax the rich.
Or
70%. Oh, the
or
polls.
what kind of health care, right? There are many different ways of insuring everybody.
Really?
We both agree.
Well, you mean...
You know I like my system from Canada. It's one of several systems that most of the developed world use. I guess my point is that...
All of the developed world. Don't say most.
Well, there's a lot of people...
Don't be moderate and pull your punch here.
Right.
All of the developed world
except for America.
Except for this country. And it's shameful, and we look weird, too. You can't explain it to a person from another country.
No, it's not a progressive policy anywhere else in the world. It's just the policy, right?
It's just the policy. Conservatives in Canada would never think of removing their Canadian health care. The Tories in Britain, all behind it.
Right.
This is the craziest thing.
So you feel strongly that it's a progressive, and it's specifically Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yes, I don't think Americans right now actually really identify themselves in the old school way of I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, you know. I don't think that's what's going on. I think that people have had it. I think that they have realized that they're sick and tired of living from paycheck to paycheck, and this has to end. And they know that their kids are never going to pay off those student
loans. And if we
loans.
didn't see it, we saw it in the shutdown, where you saw government employees, the ones that a whole bunch of Republicans spent years telling me are overpaid, who couldn't make it to their second
another
paycheck
lie
when they weren't.
Lie after lie. There's lines in Canada outside the doctor's offices. Lie after lie after lie. Has Ralph Northam called us yet? Anybody?
He hasn't. We have a minute left in the show.
We have a minute, Ralph. We've got 1 minute left.
I'm not holding out a whole lot of hope.
I'm disappointed.
Michael, thank you as always.